Hello, Sarah Baker.
I am. You okay, mate?
Yes, it feels like it's been a long time since we were in this podcast space.
It has. I had somebody just at the weekend asking when we were going to release more. And
I
I was like,
know.
oh, we're going to get on it.
Oh, I know. And what better time than at Christmas time? Because I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people are talking to me and telling me that they are stressed to the max.
Yes. And it does, I always think like when you think of Christmas, there's a saying, isn't there? 'Tis the season to be jolly. And I'm finding that there aren't that many people that are as jolly as it makes out to be because there's stress and there's so many other layers upon that at the moment for people, finances and
Yeah.
life and trauma and everything else. So yeah, definitely it's not full of the joy and jolliness that I've once experienced, I think, at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think there's a lot of expectation on Christmas, isn't there? And I think that, I myself, I was in I'm hosting Christmas this year and I have done for many years. But
Mm,
I was in a shop and I was like, oh, I really want those Rudolph plates. And then I was like, just stop. And it's like this idea that we all just get a little bit kind of caught up in it, don't we? And then do you think sometimes it kind of takes the pleasure away because we're kind of too busy thinking about all of these other stuff that actually for the one day we don't usually
mm.
think about, but that one day feels so intense, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you know what? I've said for a couple of years now, I'm not buying into the stress of it all. If something makes me feel massively stressed, then it's a no from me. And my sister messaged about some Christmas event for to go to with like, our better halves and what have you, and
Yeah.
our children. And she sent me the link and she said, oh, it's a bit pricey, but we're going on such and such a date. And for two adults, two children, it was nearly £300.
Wow.
£300 for a couple of hours in the evening for this event.
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, like my fellow's like, if you want to go, let's go. And I just said, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it. And it wasn't just for me, it was more for the fact of like there are families out there that will feel pressured to have to do those things and get
Yeah.
themselves into debt or can't afford it in the first place and miss out. And I just thought, no, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, just it's a no from me.
No, and I think that sometimes isn't it about taking that power back that we almost kind of let it take over, but it is doing things like that that you've done there, which is staying grounded and thinking, well, what is the point? Because I guess it's not really about the money. It's about when we feel like we're being like not forced by your sister, of course, but forced by the kind of event to do something when
Yeah,
actually we can just say no, can't we? Do people have a
yeah.
problem with saying no, don't they?
Yeah, do. And don't get me wrong, I love money. I'm all about money, do you know what I mean, in many ways. But only money when it gives you like freedom and things, not when
Mm.
it adds stress to it. So yeah, I think there's just no way that I was gonna buy into the stress of all that. I've kept it low key, and you know what it's like anyway. It's for the social media life, isn't it? You do all these events, and most of it you end up demented, and the kids
Yeah,
are driving you around
yeah,
the bends anyway.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I just thought, no, do you know what? This year I'm having a low key and I'm gonna make a point of doing things that feed me soul and keep me connected as much as possible to
Yeah.
the people that matter most. And I
Yeah.
think we lose sight of that, don't we?
We do, and then it's that age-old thing, Sarah, where that saying that came around, it goes around every so often, which is like you don't know it's your last until you're kind of in it. And I've been having
Hmm.
that like a lot of people where, I realized this year that there's no more nativities for me to attend. There's no more
Oh yeah.
kind of like Father Christmas because nobody kind of has that way of thinking. And I think that no one can prepare us for that. And I think when we take away the fun, we have to then be able to do what you've just said, which is then we need to make those things ourselves. We need to then be connected, and it's really important, isn't it? But I
Mm.
guess what I was going to say, and I reckon a lot of people will be on board with this, is like, what about the problems, the stresses and the strains of some of our relatives and friends who, you have them over because you're not allowed to not invite them and you feel forced to invite them. Not that there's anyone that I'm inviting, by the way, that I don't want to invite, but I know for a lot of families, I know for a lot of families, there's that's around, isn't it? And wondering whether they're gonna, whether they're gonna be causing a problem, whether they're gonna say something rude, whether they're gonna upset the apple cart. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know of people, let's just say, where every year they do the same thing. They all get together around the table and argue every single year. And I always say, like, why do you do it then? Like, why
Yeah.
why? there's this pressure of feeling like because the family or you've got to be around them, and yeah, to a certain extent,
Yeah,
I hear. There's people who you can't say, well, I'll invite you and not you. I get it, but at the same time, again, we speak about this on our podcast quite often. I am all about protecting my peace, but it's so hard to have to be around people who
yeah,
you don't really want to be around and sit and eat your dinner with them
yeah,
and make eye contact with them.
yeah.
I really, really feel that.
Especially when you feel like they're like picking at you all the time, or there's never, you can't please them, or there's nothing, the grumbling Aunt Mildred who thinks that your turkey's too dry, or worried about you not being married yet and shit like that. That people kind of, it causes people stress, doesn't it? Or even the idea
Mm,
that you buy people presents and they might not like them. And
yeah.
I've made no I've not made any attempts to hide the idea that, yeah, I think present giving is a really intimate thing. So I am quite
Mm,
like, I don't necessarily want people to go out and buy me things, because it
mm,
is quite intimate and it's personal, isn't it? But then
mm,
I don't do that thing anymore where I have to buy people and I need to please them. I think about my kids and I think, well, that's about it right now.
mm,
And I think a lot of people still have that though, don't they? That they have to buy the right
mm.
present, they have to please, or they have to have the right answers when, whoever it is around the family table. But you know this as well as I do, what a lot of people don't realize is our families are our biggest triggers, aren't they? Because they are like kind
Yes.
of our closest attachments, but they also know all of the buttons to press. And I think it can be a
Mm,
really stressful situation, can't it, when faced
yeah.
with everybody all under one roof?
Yeah, and there's so many different personalities, so many people going through certain things, and other people not, and trying to all come together. Some are happy, some are not. Some are aware of themselves, some not so much or not at all.
Yeah,
Some are diggy, some are passive, some are, and it's a lot, isn't it? And I think that what we tend to do is we leave our bodies in a way where we're like we just kind of ignore ourselves and what we're feeling just to get through. And do you know what I mean? I just can't do it anymore personally. But people are really in that place where they sacrifice themselves just to be in that dynamic.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have to be that way, does it?
No, and we talk about, I've kind of said it on my Instagram before about narratives. So it's like we can within our family, like we can go and make changes on ourselves. We can become better people. We can say that I'm not going to be as like kind of stressed out, or I'm not going to be as reactive. And then it's weird, isn't it? Because then you get into these situations and then straight away you're triggered in those environments by the different
Mhm.
people and the different situations. All that hard work that you've done on yourself goes out the window because you're just like, how did that happen? And
Yeah.
I see that in people all of the time. They've done that work, but then they get right back into that family system. And I suppose what you said is right. All these people around the table or at the home, they're their own people. They've got their own traumas, their own attachments, their own communication styles. Mix all that
Mm.
together, and it sounds like, why would we ever do it in the first place?
Yeah, I know. No, honestly, do you know what I start to do now? I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm hopeful this year I'm going to have a lovely Christmas and what have you, and I've got good people around me and stuff, and
Hmm.
and I am grateful for that. But knowing me and how sensitive I am and how overstimulated I can get, or I don't know, you never know, do you, with people? But I always check in on myself. Like before I go anywhere these
Yeah.
days, I sit there, I do like one of those body maps where like I unclench my jaw,
I thought you were
relax my
going to say something
shoulders.
else then. Yeah, unclench your jaw. I'm glad you said that. Merry
And
Christmas.
yeah, all the best, everyone.
Hmm.
And I check in with myself and I think, right, where am I at today? Emotionally, where am I? What do I need? How am I going to be today? Those type of things. Am I
Yeah,
going to be more reserved? Am I going to be? Have I got energy to give? And I do that now.
yeah,
Every social gathering that I do, and I think, do you know what? Just that going into somewhere, being present in my body,
yeah.
knowing how I'm feeling, knowing what, and then knowing, thinking, if something was to happen that weren't matching this energy or whatever, I'm off skis. I'm gone because yeah. I
Yeah.
just think it's just so important, but not everyone has that. And the way like historically you've always said if anyone said anything, you've been like okay to put them in the place and
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and how historically I've been a bit of a
Are
pleaser
you
in a
sure
way.
that's me? It doesn't sound like me.
I mean, someone told me it about you, I can't. But whereas I've been a bit of a pleaser, haven't I, in the
Yeah.
past, and kind of
Yeah.
bit my tongue so much so it nearly fell off on a few occasions.
Hmm.
And I feel like I've shifted a little bit these days. So
Mm.
I now have to tell myself to keep my mouth shut
Yeah.
And I've never been like that before. So I had a situation a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to go into it with detail because, yeah, but basically, a person is trying to better themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and another person, um, almost like rains on their parade
Yeah.
by judging from their own standards.
Yeah.
Oh well, I wouldn't do this,
Yeah.
and I sat there and I could feel like the anger inside of me bubbling,
Yeah.
thinking, why are you doing that to that person? Like they're
Yeah.
finally taking, do you know what I mean? And I couldn't. I went, can I just stop you there?
Did you?
And I can't, yeah. And I
I
just
would
was
pay
like,
to see that.
I know.
Yeah.
And I weren't angry, I weren't aggressive in any way. I just was like, I think they're doing really well, and I don't think that that's okay what you've just said.
Wow.
And it just kind of, yeah. And I walked out and I was like, oh my God. And then usually if I'd do something like that in the past, I'd have anxiety for days
Yeah.
going, oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
shouldn't have said
Yeah.
that. No, it didn't come. I waited for it to come and I was like, oh. And
Yeah.
I've just recognised on my journey how some of us can be more reactive and have to learn to, for their own peace, not have to, but for their own peace, think, actually, I'm not going to rise to
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And other people are too passive and don't say a word. And I
Yeah.
think ultimately what this is about, I think, is in terms of like the dynamics of being around people, is
Yeah.
you've got to find your balance.
Yeah.
You've got to be in your own body and figure out what it is that you want and what you need. And I think that is like really important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think what we talk about in systemic life coaching and therapy and stuff like that is every situation that we find ourselves in is a system, right? So,
Mm,
in a family system, where everybody has roles and stuff like that, what you're talking about there was actually boundaries, wasn't it? It was boundaries rather than
absolutely, yeah.
rudeness or badness or anything like that. And I think we as a nation have a problem with boundaries. Often when I'm
Mm,
working with people, they'll tell me that they've asked a certain thing of someone or they've told the person how they feel. I will use
mm,
like kind of enactment to get them to relay that conversation to me, what they said, how they said it in exactly the same way. Often what I
mm,
will pick up on is if there's a problem in the communication and actually the boundaries aren't really being set. They're not really
mm-hmm.
asking for what they want. They're not really asking for behavior change. They're also not making themselves clear. And I think there's a lot of us who struggle with boundaries. So what they do, I say us, I don't struggle with boundaries, but
You need it
what a
anymore?
lot of people do is they skirt around the issues. So they'll use implicit communication rather than explicit, because explicit's
Mm,
got a bad name. But ultimately,
mm-hmm.
the way that the world works is often when we ask for what we need and people can understand what we need, they're normally quite accommodating, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, that's a bit of a blanket approach, not always, and probably quite often for a lot of people. But what we say and how we say it, and the period in which we keep that consistent and persistent is the key. It's not about saying something once or having a boundary once and saying to your family member, no, I don't like that, don't do it. It's about
Mm-hmm.
repeating that boundary over and over again until the person understands that it's no longer permissible. What we
Mm-hmm.
permit persists, right? And this is what happens at
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, that people's
Mm-hmm.
behavior has gone on so long in the family system and nobody
Mm-hmm.
calls it out, or people call it out and they get the black sheep. And actually, all this tension, when actually if people were able to understand the real what but real boundaries look like, a bit like what you were describing,
Yeah.
actually, I think communication and those experiences would be a lot easier, a lot more pleasant, a lot nicer. Not for
Mm-hmm.
everybody, but in
No.
general.
No, I completely agree. And I think for a lot of people have lots of abandonment, rejection, trauma responses, and that is why we are the way we are ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah.
Through our lived experiences, we create a self-concept and a behavior pattern based off everything we've been through and what, I could go deep in that, but I'm not going to. But I think a lot of people fear that if I don't continue being this person, then I will be rejected. I won't
Yes.
be loved.
Yeah.
I won't be liked. I won't be this. I won't be that. And
Yeah.
and there has to, I think, be a lot of work in the build up to putting boundaries in place,
Yeah.
to learn about your worth, to learn about being brave, to learn about your fear response, and to learn that actually the right people will stay, the
Yeah.
right people will adapt.
Yeah.
And I know that's a scary thought because there's a real fear around being abandoned or rejected and what have
Yeah.
you for a lot of people, but the right people will stick around. And that's
Absolutely.
what's really important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's our childhood and our attachments that make us think they won't. And you'll remember from our training, what you're referring to there is Conditions of Worth, isn't it, by Carl
I
Rogers,
am,
which
yeah.
is the
Yeah.
idea that we convince ourselves that actually if we don't perform or behave in a particular way, then actually people will withdraw their love. Sometimes we've
Mm-hmm.
learnt that and we've learnt that that's what happens, but we carry it through our lives and don't realise that actually that might have been a one-off, or it might have happened when we were
Mm-hmm.
younger, and we keep that narrative, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I think those conditions of worth, we need to test them, because quite often it's not true. People will not stop loving us. The people who love us dearly and really, and that's not even a word, raw, people who love us for who we are will be
Mm-hmm.
able to accept the boundaries, and will be able to accept our differences, won't they? And that
Yeah.
if we put our boundary and say that's not for me, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
decided, I think I've said this before on the podcast, and some of my friends laugh about it, but you know, there's things, I don't go to certain events anymore that people invite me to, because I just think, I said, oh, I'm not going to any more christenings, and I'm not going to any more religious dues, and mainly because I don't follow a religion. Now, you know, follow a religion if you want, but I don't. So I got really sick of sitting, being forced to sing or listening to stuff. And it's about that boundary, isn't it? That I'm not insulting
Mm-hmm.
anybody, I'm just choosing not to do something. And at first, when
Mm-hmm.
people hear that, or they say, or you actually say you don't want to go to a party, and they feel really rejected. But over time, what's happened is people go, oh, yeah, we know Emma. She won't want to go to that. We still ask her, but we know that she might not, and it's her choice. And I think that's really positive.
I think so. And I think, ultimately, y- if you were to express some of the issues and the struggles that you're faced with in terms of the people around you, a lot of them, as you say, will be like, I did not know you felt that way. What can
Yeah.
we do about it?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
absolutely. And that is the thing, isn't it? Because we hear this all the time with the sensitive topic of suicide. You know, most
Mm-hmm.
people who take their own lives feel like the world is better off without them. Yet the
Mm-hmm.
people that are left behind would often do anything. But I suppose quite frequently people don't necessarily communicate their needs, or they don't feel heard, or people don't understand how serious that need is. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's really difficult, isn't it?
It is. And I think, obviously, there's suicide, and then there's also the other side of what we're saying in terms of the people that won't change and won't adapt and won't stick
Yeah,
around for that person,
yeah,
because, if you're changing as a person, there are people around you who then have to adapt and physically can't. It's
yeah,
impossible for
yeah,
them. And therefore, then, that's the dark side of what we're talking about, isn't it? Because,
yeah,
sometimes people may end up alone, and I think loneliness and isolation and low mood and going as far as suicide, especially this time of year, is so high, because
yes,
again, that
yeah.
thing of tis the season to be jolly, I
Well,
always
yeah,
say it, but
yeah.
it really adds it on thick, doesn't it? It adds the pressure
It does, it does. And I've
onto
done a
people.
post, yeah, I've done a post recently about, well, just today actually, talking about kind of different boundaries and stuff like that, and the pressures of like kind of consumerism, and this idea that, you know, I certainly was thinking just a couple of days ago, you know, I've got my child an iPhone, and I've got them some really expensive stuff because that's what they're asking for now. And then thinking, oh, there's not enough under the tree, there's not enough to unwrap, and this idea that you then like
Hmm.
kind of, well, what society thinks about what we should be doing within our relationships, within our kind of gift giving, all of that. It's just loaded, isn't it?
Honestly, and you know what I think as well, what I feel, or what I have to be mindful of is, well, what did I feel actually when I was younger? There was moments of this, there was moments of that, and I want my kids to have, I mean, listen, I'm not saying my parents done bad by all means, but I'm saying I want my kids to have better than what I got.
Yeah.
And we always have a
I
story,
wanted a
don't we,
Mr.
from
Frosty.
I know, yeah. I remember when I wanted a mountain bike, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And it is that, isn't it? And you then always think, oh no, but I don't want them to feel that feeling. And
yeah,
actually, at some point, they're gonna feel it regardless of how
yeah,
much you do. And if any, and you're gonna give them that much, then they're gonna be Do you know what I mean? It's important to recognise the drive and force behind what you're doing,
yeah,
and what connections it's got with
yeah.
you and your past too.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And it's having that word with yourself, isn't it? Because like I say, I was there, I was thinking it, but I kind of thought, well, no, this is society, this stuff, you need to have this conversation with yourself, but it's not easy, is it, at all?
Mm.
So I think what said we were going to talk about as well, because obviously this is a 30-minute podcast to get everybody in the mood for Christmas. I want to just summarize that bit
Talking
by
about trauma, getting
yeah,
everyone in the
exactly.
mood.
And I wanted to say, you know what? The thing is that there's nothing we can do right now sometimes.
No.
Sometimes it's about kind of just doing what you said, having that breather and kind of like getting through Christmas, getting through New Year.
Mhm.
And then there's the commitment in January to
Mhm.
thinking like next year, I need this to be different. And this is one of the messages that
Yes.
I send in my systemic work, which is, you know what, we have to notice things first. Before we do anything, we
Yep.
can't change anything until we notice. And I kind of do a
Exactly.
little bit in my coaching. I do like kind of uncover, unknot, create. So I uncover what the core problems really are, what not what we think they
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
Unknot them, and then we create the life that we want. So there's a process in that, right? So what it
Yeah.
brings me to is yes, it can be traumatic. Yes, this is kind of going to really test a lot of people, but we'll be there in your pocket, listen to this, and and we'll be here in the new year, won't we? So what I was thinking
Absolutely.
that we spoke about was the idea of then, like, yeah, what does it feel like to be reflecting upon the year? What's it like to get to the end of the year, thinking about the future? So yeah, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, as therapists, we have something called supervision, and it's to, make sure we're staying on top of everything, that we're ethical, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about our experiences and what have you. And I always have one in December of, right, how's this past year been?
Yeah,
What are you happy with? What do you want to leave in the year? What do you want to let go of, and then what you want for next year.
yeah,
And I think people naturally come to that conclusion. You can see, even if you're in the world of social media, you can see people saying, oh, worst year in my life, let me
yeah,
move on to next year, or I'm going to leave that into the year, or just had the best year. And it's naturally kind of what we do, isn't it?
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I'm definitely doing that myself at the moment. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I'm trying to accept that I've made lots of changes in the last year that have brought me to where I am today. And as you know yourself, I've had quite a bit of a tricky 7 or 8 weeks prior to us doing this.
Yeah.
And it's been a
Yeah.
really difficult time. But what I'm doing is I'm taking each day as it comes and thinking, this is you made lots of changes, you did lots of things. So the repercussion with change is not always comfortable, right? So what I'm
Hmm.
thinking about the new year is how I become more kind of how I become more grounded, how I become kind of more committed to some of the things like this that we do, because it's been really hard for us to find time. But this is something that
Hmm.
I love. This like kind of lights me up. Yet here we are, a few months down the line, not having done one, and it's things like that, isn't it? Where are we doing? We should be doing more of the things that we love, and that's what I would
Hmm.
say to people: doing more of the things that you love and eliminating the things that you hate, and not
Yeah.
the people that you hate. Don't eliminate them, but perhaps think about those relationships, how you manage them, and be going into kind of 2026 with the idea that, for me, Sarah, I've said this all
Mm.
along, there is not a problem that has come to my practice that hasn't been about communication.
Yeah.
You can come to me about grief, and actually, somewhere in that grief, there will be issues around communication, whether that would be with
Hmm.
the person who's gone, the people who are still around. There's no problem that hasn't got communication issue in it. And what that always tells me is that means we can change, because
Yeah.
communication is something you can master. But if you don't
It
know you're
is.
not a good communicator, if you don't know how you're actually showing up, then how can you change it? So for me,
Mm.
2026 is all about looking inward, doing that life wheel, and thinking again about what is it we really want? What do we want to create here?
Yeah, and I think communication as well is largely about the communication you have with yourself,
Yeah.
because a lot of people have that kind of inner voice, which is the loudest voice inside of them,
Yeah,
which is so critical
yeah,
and putting down and really kind of damaging to to your own self, and it's quite self-sabotaging in many
yeah,
ways.
yeah, it
And
is.
I really sorry, not echo, urge people to really think about the communication you're having with yourself.
Yeah,
What's your self dialogue? Because it's
yes.
only then, as you say, observe that for now. It's only then that when you get to grips with that, can you then begin to change the world around you?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I always forget that part. You always bring that in. I'm the one that's kind of talks about the other talking out loud with people, but you're right. The voice inside is the one that's going to catch us every time. And the problem being is that we have a thought. Like I was laid in bed last night and I had a thought of something quite daft, right? And I was
Mm.
thinking, oh, okay, what does that mean? And then I thought, but it's a thought, right? We don't control
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, okay? But they come into our head, and then what we do is we give them airtime. And so, say,
Mm.
if you think a bad thought about someone, something, or whatever, and you then kind of give it airtime, then that thought becomes your kind of like feelings, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're right that in 2026, thinking about how do we think, how do we talk to ourselves, how are we thinking about ourselves? Are we being negative with ourselves? I think someone mentioned the other day, on a call to someone and they said they were talking about the problems, and she actually said, and I know that this is a champagne problem. And I stopped her in her
Mm,
tracks and I really challenged it. And I
mm,
said, there's no such thing as a champagne problem. So I'm
no.
really interested in that narrative that you're telling yourself, which is basically diminishing your own kind of difficulties. And
Mm,
she was really grateful for that reflection, because I don't think she'd realised that that was her mindset. That's where she is. And
mm.
they're the stories and the things that she's telling herself.
Yeah, we spend our time minimizing our own self,
Yeah,
invalidating our own worth and, giving to everyone else. And
yeah,
actually, you spend the most time with yourself in your own head.
yeah,
And that should be the best environment that you put yourself in, the one
yes,
that's inside of yourself. That's the one you should nurture most.
yeah,
And I think that's something I've worked on now for over a decade.
yeah,
And, that's the one that will give you peace or absolute chaos and destruction,
yeah,
you know. And some people don't know where to start. And I would say start with observing yourself.
yeah,
Start with observing your patterns. And then from moving forwards with that, then you can look at the areas you think and feel
yes.
need to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't jump before you can walk. And I'm always surprised because
No.
people are reluctant to pay for like kind of help that we provide. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what people don't realize is there is something to it, isn't there? This is,
Mm-hmm.
we don't just think and then kind of change. What we need is we need support to figure it out. We often need support to kind of be accountable, to make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Litvin talks about, we help clients to see things because the angle that they're looking at it is a bit ski whiff. So he didn't use
Mm-hmm.
those words, obviously. I've just
I
paraphrased them,
love that
but
word though,
that's
by the way.
ski whiff.
Yeah.
It's an interesting word, isn't it? And so, we help people see what they can't see from the angle they're looking at it, is what he actually said, which is very, very eloquent. But yes, and I think that for me, what I would want and urge people to do is, yes, notice, but I also think, we talked about this last time, didn't we? The life wheel. Do a life wheel, do a life inventory where you look at every
Mm.
single area of your life, every single area, and you rate it and you think about it properly and you make sure that you understand where you're at in all of those areas. I've had people
Yeah.
do this and say, I'm actually depressed now. That's way worse than I thought. Then I've had people say, well, I've got a really good life. And sometimes those people are lying to themselves and we need to work on it.
Yeah.
But you've got to
Yeah.
start somewhere. And then you don't change
Mm-hmm.
all of those things at once, but you do a real life inventory, because that's the thing that's going to tell us, where do we need to do the work? Where would I like to show up differently? And what have I got control over or not got control over?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it is important to kind of thrash that out with another person because we're
Yeah.
living in these cycles that we've always lived in, and sometimes it can take someone else to highlight it
Yeah.
for us to realise, oh, that can be changed. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about, I bang on about systemic all the time, is that I get
Hmm.
so many people who come to me and say, you know what, I'm really not good, but my life is really good. I should be happy. I've got a decent car, I've got a decent house, blah, 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 blah. And if I had a pound for every time someone kind of told me that, and
Mm,
you don't disbelieve the clients, but you always know, I don't know about you, I always think, okay. And then we get a few kind of, not even a few sessions, normally in the first session, uncovering stuff. And kind of
yeah.
what happens is you get to see that, for me, systemically, there's things going on in that person's life that isn't great
Mm,
for them, but they're
absolutely.
just so conditioned to putting up with it. They're so conditioned to kind of not have boundaries. They're so conditioned to kind of say, oh, I should be
Mm,
grateful. And so I work with a lot of people to go, should you? Like, yes, there's
yeah.
gratitude, but we can have toxic gratitude, can't we?
Yeah. And I always look at the words like should.
Mm,
I should be doing that, but I'm not. I should be. And I think, hmm,
mm,
okay, first and
yeah,
foremost, why should you?
yeah,
And then I think we're told, aren't we, grow up,
yeah,
get a good job,
yeah,
get a nice house, get a nice car, have a family, and that's what life should
yeah,
be,
yeah, yeah,
And actually, we're not told how you're meant to feel in that and what your life, you know, can look like and how you can create a life that doesn't feel so empty and hollow
mm-hmm,
inside because you're
mm-hmm,
trying to keep up with you know, whatever society is saying you should,
yeah,
and I think that it is really important to kind of question actually, am I getting fulfillment in my
yeah,
life? Do I
yeah,
feel content? Do I feel empty? And again, if you haven't had huge traumas in your life where you go, well, they've been through that and I haven't,
yeah,
I've got to cheat to moon.
yeah,
Everybody at some point has experienced trauma.
yeah,
Trauma is to disconnect, and it
yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean you have to have had a significant life event
yeah,
to go, oh my God, this is why the way I
yeah,
am. I
absolutely.
guarantee if you was to sit and talk about things, even though
Hmm.
you think, well, I had a nice childhood, I guarantee there's a shitload of things there for you
Yeah.
to
Oh
reflect
my
upon
God.
and work through.
Yes. Yeah,
No one gets
absolutely.
out of this. No
No,
one gets out of this, without
no,
being
no.
affected or impacted.
Exactly. And one of my kids said to me the other day, "You're like really intelligent, but you are a bit weird, you know." And I thought, I wonder what she, I wonder what she means, and like, how's that going to come up in therapy in years to come? Because as you know, I always think my kids will end up in therapy because I made them talk about their feelings. So all these things that we avoid to do. So we're kind of coming to a close today, and I want to kind of say, what's the one message you want to send out before we end?
You are the way you are for a reason. Be gentle and kind to yourself, and know that the way you feel today isn't necessarily how you need to feel for the
Yeah.
rest of your life.
Yeah,
You've
absolutely.
got this.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And that what sometimes all it takes is the right book, the right listen, the right conversation to realize that we have
Mm.
way more control and power than we ever think we have. But we have to
Yeah.
have ourselves, we have to give ourselves the opportunity to look at ourselves and look inward because that's where it starts, right?
It is. And can I just tell you something really
Yes,
quickly
quick.
before we
Yeah.
finish? I've just finished a therapy session with somebody you've
Yeah.
been working with for some time. As therapists, we talk about being ethical and, professionalism and
Yeah.
all of those things. And this person, I see them on a Tuesday. And when they left a few weeks ago, they said, "See you next Tuesday." And I said, "What if you just called me?" Because that's the relationship we can have with them. So each time they leave now, they say, "See you next Tuesday, CUNT." And I've just had the last session before the new year, of course, with them, and they've just made me a mug, and on it, there was a picture of a sea. There was a picture of like a U that that looks like a animal, and
Yeah.
then next Tuesday on my cup. So I've just got a
Oh.
mug from my client, basically calling me a
Oh,
cunt,
I love that.
and I
Well,
loved it.
I actually have one, yeah, with the word spelled out. To be honest, I'll have to post a
Yeah,
picture on the socials. They got it right directly for me. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing, isn't it? And I
right.
think,
So
go on.
I'm going into the new year as a cunt.
Good. Well, good, because we need to be sometimes, don't we? And I
I
think,
agree.
we promised the listeners that we will be back and we will be sending some more podcasts their way. So watch this space and much love. And if people do get to the point where I don't know what your availability or capacity is like, Sarah,
Mm.
but if people
Not
do
much at
need
the moment.
support, then they can get in touch and we can always direct them. Or if it's family and systemic stuff and coaching, obviously they can chat to me. But the point is that you're not alone. We are here with you
No.
and we will be
Yeah.
there in the new year.
Take good care of yourself.
Take good
Enjoy
care.
some of the special moments
Yeah.
and get through the shit ones.
Yes. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Lots of love.
Yeah.
Bye
See you
now.
soon. Bye.